It is Tuesday, February the 9th. Hannah, would you please call the roll?
Fred Berry.
Present.
Anthony Harris.
Here.
Tanya Skellhane.
Here.
Clark McKinney.
Here.
Scotty Porch.
Here.
Charles Rahm.
Here.
Robert Shackelford.
Here.
Mr. President, all members are accounted for.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. We'd like to take a moment to welcome our newest board member. They are our consumer representative, and that is Scotty Porch from Lewisburg, Tennessee. Scotty, we'll give you the floor and give you an opportunity just to introduce yourself and share any details that you would like to share with the board at this time.
I just thank the governor for putting me on. It's good to meet one of them. And having a little bit of computer problem, but we'll get it straightened out. But it's just good to be on here and look forward to the meeting.
And sorry, everybody, just as a reminder, if you're not speaking, could you please put yourself on mute so we can have some clear audio? Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder, Dustin. And Scotty, we welcome you and are grateful for your willingness to serve on this board. And I'm sure you'll find it to be an educational experience, and we look forward to your contributions.
Thank you.
Bendale, would you please enter the statement of necessity into the record today?
Sure. This is a telephonic scheduled meeting of the Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers. Notice of this February 9th, 2021 meeting, including the date and time, was posted to the board's website on November 6, 2021. Additionally, this month's agenda was posted to the website on February 4th, 2021. As there is not a physical quorum present, a statement of necessity will be read into the record and filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State. Pursuant to TCA 8-44-108B2, which states if a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, then in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication, the governing body must make a determination that a necessity exists. Further, TCA 8-44-108A3 defines necessity as a matter to be considered by the governing body at that meeting requiring timely action by the body. The physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means is necessary. As stated, this was a previously scheduled meeting of the Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers that is now being held telephonically, and the purpose of this meeting with members attending by teleconference is to conduct regular business of the board, and voting will be conducted by roll call.
Thank you, Ms. Bendale. Our next item of business will be to review and adopt the agenda for today's meeting.
This is Anthony. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Harris and a second by Mr. McKinney to adopt the agenda as presented. Do we have any further discussion? Ms. Bohannon, would you please call the roll?
Fred Berry.
Yes.
Anthony Harris.
Yes.
Tanya Haynes.
Yes.
Clark McKinney.
Yes.
Scotty Porch.
Yes.
Charles Rahm.
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
The agenda passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. Our next item of business will be to review and approve the board meeting minutes for our December the 8th, 2020 meeting. You should have those in your email from Ms. Bohannon.
This is Fred. I move that we approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Berry. Do we have a second?
This is Charles. I'll second.
Second by Mr. Rahm. Any further discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, would you please call the roll?
Fred Berry.
Yes.
Anthony Harris.
Yes.
Tanya Haynes.
Yes.
Clark McKinney.
Yes.
Scotty Porch.
Yes.
Charles Rahm.
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
The minutes have been approved.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. I believe that our minutes for the January 12th, 2021 meeting will be available at our next board meeting, so we will defer discussion of those minutes until that time. Ms. Bendale, we will ask you to present the legal report at this time.
Mr. President,
Oh, yes, Mr. Rom.
I need the record to reflect that I will be recusing myself from the legal report today.
All right, they'll let the record so reflect that Mr. Rom is recusing himself from the legal report in today's meeting. Ms. Bendale, you may begin your report.
Good morning again. Item number 1 on the report is complaint 2020-07-3191 against a funeral director. This was a consumer complaint alleging unprofessional conduct by the respondent. Specifically, the consumer stated that in August 2020, the consumer was referred to the respondent after the passing of their grandmother. The consumer stated that they arrived at the location to make arrangements, but that the location was a mess and it did not appear that there was a place to do services. The consumer stated that they had inquired about other locations, and in response, the respondent informed the consumer that costs could be cut in half in exchange for sexual favors. The respondent did provide a response to this complaint and denied all allegations made by the consumer. The respondent stated that they had never met with the consumer to make arrangements and that no one associated with the respondent's establishment had ever met with the consumer. The respondent had stated that the allegations were false claims. This complaint was sent for investigation, and in January 2020, a board field investigator attempted multiple times to get in contact with the complainant. However, the complainant did not provide a valid telephone number, email address, or residential address. After reviewing the documents and obtaining a statement from the respondent, no violations were found. It's legal's recommendation to close this complaint.
I move we accept your recommendation to close. This is Fred.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Berry to accept council's recommendation of closure. Do we have a second?
This is Clark. I'll second.
We have a second by Mr. McKinney. Any other discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Items
Thank you, Ms.
number
Bohannon.
Items number 2 and 3 go together. They are complaint 2020-07-8181 against a funeral director and complaint 2020-07-9131 against an embalmer. Mr. Shackelford, I was wondering if there's anything you'd like to say on the record.
Yes, there is. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Ms. Bendale, I would like to enter into the record of these proceedings the following statement. On Saturday, February 6th, 2021, I was contacted by the present employer of the respondent that is referenced in complaint number 2 and 3 for the purpose of discussing material facts related to complaint 2 and 3. While I do not believe this contact and the subsequent discussions have colored my ability to consider and render an impartial judgment on this matter, I felt it important to share that information with the board and the public that we serve in the interest of full disclosure. I would like to further add that matters of this nature and how the board addresses these matters are a direct reflection upon the integrity of our profession and its practitioners. It is a well-accepted principle and true that people who are faithful and just in small matters will be faithful and just in more substantial matters. I believe it is equally true that people who are unfaithful and unjust in small matters will be unfaithful and unjust in matters of greater substance. consequences and actions go together, and many times the consequences of our actions have a far-reaching impact beyond the person who committed the acts. I just feel it's very important that we take complaints of this nature with the level of seriousness that they deserve when it involves moral turpitude. Thank you, Ms. Bendo.
Thank you, Mr. Shackelford. I just want to confirm
Yes.
for the record that you feel as though even despite speaking with the respondent's employer on matters number 2, number 3, you feel as though you can make an unbiased decision on this matter.
Yes.
Mr. President, if I might, this is Clark. I also had a conversation yesterday about this case, the generalities with an acquaintance of the respondent's employer, and I personally did not feel any pressure one way or the other, and I don't feel that it'll have any bearing on my judgment today either. But due to the fact that we have an oath and have signed our conflict of interest statements, I feel that also that I needed just to let you know that I have had a conversation.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. If no one else has to speak, I'll proceed with complaint number 2, number 3.
Ms. Bendale,
Yes.
sorry, I was slow to get off mute there. I too was contacted, let the record reflect, and I have no problem. There was no pressure given there. It is concerning when we are contacted on matters such as this, but that will, the discussion will no way reflect the decision today.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. I appreciate that. Okay, moving forward, if no one else was contacted or has any more to add to the record.
Ms. Bendale,
Yes.
I'm sorry. I was also contacted as well.
Okay.
And of course, I don't feel the conversation that I have would reflect on my decision on this matter as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So just for the record, it appears that at least 4 of our board members have been contacted by the respondent's employer. However, they feel as though going forward, they're able to make an unbiased decision on these matters. So this was an ex-employer complaint alleging unprofessional conduct and theft by the respondent. Specifically, the complainant states that in July 2020, they discovered that pre-need funeral funds were not deposited within the 15 days required by law. The complainant states that they confronted the respondent and admitted that they did not deposit, and the respondent admitted that they did not deposit the funds. The complainant states that the respondent paid back the missing funds and that in August 2020, the respondent was terminated. The complainant states that they conducted an internal investigation, and in September 2020, they discovered that an entire funeral file was missing. And the complainant states that there was no record for any funds received by the family. The complainant states that they contacted the next of kin, who stated that they paid cash up front and they made a check payable to the respondent. The respondent did provide a lengthy response indicating the following: that the money from the first pre-need contract was stolen while in the respondent's care, and that the respondent did not inform their ex-employer out of fear and shame. The respondent also stated that the consumer did not pay $400 cash up front and that all other payments were brought to the funeral home. This complaint was sent out for investigation, and in January 2020, a board field investigator interviewed and obtained documents from the various parties involved. The board field investigator discovered several violations, including that the respondent had failed to deposit the $6,100 of pre-need funeral funds within the 15 days required by the law, and that an additional $2,500 in insurance of pre-need funeral funds. However, that $2,500 was later paid to the funeral home on the funeral account. Additionally, a consumer check for $1,300 was written to the respondent and deposited into the respondent's personal account. The respondent had engaged in fraudulent and deceptive practices. Based on the investigation discoveries, it's legal's recommendation to authorize for a formal hearing and authorize a suspension of the funeral director and embalmer's license for a period of 6 calendar months, beginning on the first day of the month following the execution of the consent order. Additionally, it's legal's recommendation to a $1,000 civil penalty require 10 hours of continuing education courses approved by the board, and a successful passage of the Tennessee laws, rules, and regulations exams, all done via consent order. Additionally, the consent order shall include that the respondent cannot work, perform services, or be associated in any manner with a funeral establishment during the suspension period. If anyone has any questions or would like to discuss on the record, I'd be happy to answer those.
Ms. Bendale, were there any criminal charges filed in this matter?
I don't believe there were. From legal's perspective, we were just looking at what was violated on our side, but I'd be happy to look further into whether or not there was criminal charges. The complaint or the investigation didn't indicate that there were.
Thank you.
Ms. Bendale, this is Anthony. Quick question. We had something similar to this just a couple months ago, if I recall right. Is there a reason why we're not? Because to me, this is pretty serious and has a lot of unethical issues going on here. Is there a reason why we wouldn't recommend a year?
So it was, if you recall, it was legal's recommendation to do 6 months then, and then the board chose to do 12 months. I'd be happy to up it to 12 months if that's something the board wanted to discuss, but in keeping consistent with legal's recommendation, we kept it at 6 months with those additional requirements, and it's the board's discretion to up that if they would like.
I mean, I'll wait to hear from others, but to me, this is just as serious as the other issue we dealt with. I just have a problem with a lot of things that have gone on right here. I'm in favor that we change that to a year, but that's my opinion.
Miss Bendale, Mr. President, if I could ask Mrs. Clark, what was this on 2 separate occasions or 3 separate occasions?
Appears that there was one specific occasion of $6,100 going missing, and then there was an instance where a check was supposed to be deposited for pre-need funeral funds, and then it was altered and later paid on a funeral home account. So it would have been at need in that situation, but it looks like there was, around 2 pre-need issues and 1 at need issue regarding.
Okay. And I'm assuming, has there been a complaint filed with Burial Services also? There
has, yes.
Okay.
And that has not been heard yet as of today.
Okay. And you feel confident that the investigator, you feel confident in the investigator's findings that this does reach the level that you have recommended, and this is also goes along with the one we had, seems like 2-3 months ago also?
Yes, I do feel confident in my recommendation, and I think legal as a whole feels confident. This was definitely discussed thoroughly, and the investigation was conducted to confirm that these allegations were true. So legal's recommendation is, we're confident in that recommendation at this time.
Okay. I don't recall, but is there, of course, wrongdoing's wrongdoing, but was there a difference in like the amounts of money? Was the one we had before, was it a greater amount or about the same or?
So the allegation from the last month's complaint was it was from December of 2020, I apologize, was a larger amount, but then that was brought to criminal court and it was tried on an amount that was similar to this amount, I believe.
Okay.
They were ultimately convicted of around $3,000 of theft.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Fred. Just a question or clarification. Do we know, did the investigators determine, did the respondent, what really caused the respondent to pay back these funds? It's sort of the order of timing. Do you know when that occurred?
If you give me one moment, I can give you the timeline on that. So, based on the investigation, it looks like the funds were taken in October of 2019, and then the confrontation as well as the payback of funds occurred in around July of 2020.
And the confrontation was between the funeral home owner and the,
Yes, the complainant and the respondent.
okay, thank you.
This is Clark. I may be trying to ask the same thing as Mr. Berry, but this was brought to the former employer's attention. Did they find these discrepancies, or did the individual come forward first? Which happened first? Did just so that I'm clear, did the individual own up to what had happened first, or did the employer find out that this money was missing and then have a confront them about the missing funds?
Based on the investigation interviews and the complaint itself, it appears as though the owner found the discrepancies and then the respondent was questioned. And then the repayment happened after that. And then an additional investigation was conducted internally after her departure.
Thank you. I just wanted to be perfectly clear on that point.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Bendel regarding these two matters?
No other questions. This is Fred. I agree. This is a very serious issue, and it's a ethical and a trust issue. Not only a trust of the family, but it's also a betrayal of trust of the funeral home. And it's just a very, very serious matter. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Do we have any other comments? If not, we'll entertain a motion if someone is ready to proceed.
This is
Just one
Anthony.
other question.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Fred.
Anthony.
You're
Just
good.
one other question. The individual did have the ability that they could have appeared on this meeting today, correct?
That is correct. So we do keep the reports confidential, and we ask that respondents do not speak up because it could change the board members' opinions. However, it is open to the public and everyone is welcome to attend this meeting.
Okay, thank you. And then also this could result in a formal hearing too, correct?
That is correct. That is correct, yes. We'll give the respondent 30 days to agree to these terms, and if not, then I will be filing a notice of hearing and charges within 14 days of that, and we will proceed forward to a hearing.
This is Anthony. I totally agree with Fred. It's bad for the funeral home's image with the community. Also, the standards to do what's right by that family. In my opinion, I think we agree to everything that you've laid before us, but in my heart of heart, I think with what we dealt with in the past, I think there ought to be a year suspension with this. And that would be my motion.
All right, you've heard the motion by Mr. Harris to alter the recommendation of council and make the suspension effective for 1 year or 12 calendar months. Do we have a second?
This is Fred. I'll second that. Could I ask one more question before we vote?
Certainly.
Of course.
Just for clarification, if somebody, if charges were filed against this individual and it was, and they were prosecuted for it, that could actually jeopardize somebody's license being taken away permanently. Could not?
It is part of our law that it is the board's discretion to permanently suspend, revoke a license for a conviction of moral turpitude. And that is something we could approach down the line if that conviction were to ever come about.
I'm not recommending that. I just, for clarification, with these serious issues of fraud and that ultimately, that could result in the totally loss of a license. And I think our industry just needs to be well aware of the consequences of actions such as these.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Harris and a second by Mr. Berry to alter council's recommendation and change the suspension from a period of 6 calendar months to a period of 12 calendar months. Is there any other discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, would you please call the roll?
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. Ms. Bendel, you may proceed to the next complaint.
Thank you. Items number 4 and number 5 go together. They are complaint 2020-08-2731 against an establishment, and item number 2020-08-2741 against a funeral director. This was an complaint based on an inspection conducted in September of 2020. During the inspection, the representative discovered that the funeral director's license for the respondent funeral director had expired on June 30th, 2020, and was not reinstated until July 30th of 2020, during which time the respondent funeral director conducted services and acted as the establishment manager. The respondent did respond to this complaint and they apologized for the oversight, and the respondent indicated that as soon as they found out about their license expiration, they rectified the situation. It's legal's recommendation to do a letter of warning for both the establishment and the funeral director.
This is Fred. I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation of letter of warning.
And this is Clark. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Berry and a second by Mr. McKinney to accept council's recommendation. Is there any other discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, would you please call the roll?
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon.
Item number 6 is complaint 2020-08-291 against a funeral director with no disciplinary history. This was a consumer complaint alleging unprofessional conduct by the respondent. The complainant stated that in October of 2020, their mother passed away, and due to an estranged relationship, they found out via social media. The complainant indicated that they were contacted by the respondent and informed that they would not be able to attend their mother's funeral due to the family's request that the consumer be barred. The complainant says that they attended the viewing and that the respondent allowed the complainant a private viewing. The complainant states that they were then told that their stepfather paid more to keep her out. The complainant says that they were disappointed that they were not allowed to attend the funeral. The respondent did provide a response to this complaint, and they indicated that they feel like they have been pulled into a personal legal battle between family members. The respondent says that they were following the wishes of the legal next of kin and deny the allegations that the funeral establishment accepted additional money to exclude the complainant. Based on this, it's legal's recommendation to close this complaint.
This is Anthony. I'll make a motion. We take legal's recommendation.
This is Clark. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Harris and a second by Mr. McKinney to accept council's recommendation for closure. Is there any other discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon.
Item number 7 is complaint 2020-084231 against a funeral director with no disciplinary history. This was a consumer complaint alleging unprofessional conduct by the respondent. The consumer states that on March 7, 2020, their child passed away, and that the respondent lacked compassion and was disrespectful during their time of grieving. The consumer states that the viewing of her daughter was traumatizing as there was a horrific odor and the deceased was not in good condition. The consumer states that they did not receive their daughter's ashes until March 25, 2020, at which point she explained the pain she had endured from viewing her daughter. The consumer states that the respondent lacked compassion regarding the entire incident. The respondent did respond to this complaint, and they indicated that the only communication the respondent had with the consumer was the initial phone call to set up an arrangement conference. The respondent stated that the deceased remained in refrigeration after arriving at the establishment on March 7, 2020. The respondent further stated that because the consumer chose basic cremation, the deceased remained in refrigeration because no other preparation was requested. The respondent stated that the staff did set basic features on the deceased as they were able to, but that the deceased was presented to the consumer as she came to the facility. In regards to the ashes timeline, the respondent says that the death certificate was signed by the doctor on 3/13/20. The cremation permit was sent to the health department on 3/16/20, and it was scheduled for the consumer to witness the cremation on 3/19/20, but that the consumer was unreachable. The respondent states that they called on Monday, 3/23, to inform the consumer that the remains were ready to be picked up. It's legal's recommendation to close this complaint.
This is Fred. I'll make a motion that we accept your recommendation to close.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Berry to accept council's recommendation. Do we have a second?
This is Anthony. I'll second.
We have a second by Mr. Harris. Any other discussion? Not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Item number 8 is complaint 2020-085041 against an establishment with no disciplinary history. This was a consumer complaint alleging unprofessional conduct and issues with the condition of the respondent establishment. Specifically, the consumer alleged the following: that there were bugs throughout the establishment, that the toilet was not functioning, that the obituary information was delayed. Additionally, when placed on the website, there were errors in the obituary. There were plywood placed where a sidewalk had previously been dug up, and that the exterior grass was shin high. The consumer states that they had contacted the respondent about the issues, but that the respondent was unresponsive. The consumer did provide photographs. The respondent did respond to this complaint and apologized for the consumer's experience. The respondent stated that they were dealing with many of the prior owner's deficiencies and that they are working to address them. The respondent further stated that they had been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic, which had affected their business and their staff, and they stated that they will work hard to correct the matters addressed in the complaint. Based on the information provided in the respondent's past disciplinary history, it's legal's recommendation to authorize for a formal hearing and authorize a civil penalty of $250 via consent order.
This is Fred. Was there a reason that we did not send an investigator to investigate the funeral home conditions?
There was a reason. It was because there were pictures provided from the complainant, and the respondent themselves did not deny or fight the fact that there are issues with the conditions of the establishment. They indicated that they're working on correcting them.
This is Clark. I'll move to accept council's recommendation.
We have a motion by Mr. McKinney to accept council's recommendation. Do we have a second?
This Tanya, I'll second.
A second by Ms. Haynes. Any further discussion? Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon.
Item number 9 is complaint 2020-087821 against an establishment with disciplinary history from 2006. This was a consumer complaint alleging unprofessional conduct. Specifically, the consumer stated that in November of 2020, the consumer arrived at the respondent establishment to bury their mother. The consumer states that it was discussed placing the dirt to the left of the grave, but that when they arrived, the dirt was on the right and they could not have a true graveside service. The consumer stated that they informed the respondent that they were unhappy and they would not be paying for the opening of the grave, at which point the respondent threatened the consumer. The consumer states that the grave was closed, but his parents' headstone was cracked in the process and dirt remained piled up. The consumer states that they fear the respondent will go back and dig up their mother. The respondent did provide a response to this complaint and indicated the following: that the respondent was only hired for the opening and closing of the grave, that the dirt pile was placed to the north due to a large cedar tree in close proximity to the grave, that the consumer called the respondent and berated them for the dirt placement, and the respondent states that they explained why the dirt was placed where it was, but that the consumer continued to curse the respondent out. The respondent stated that the damage to the headstone was not caused by them and they are unsure how the damage got there. The respondent states that the allegation that they would dig up the consumer's mother is absurd. It's legal's recommendation to close this complaint.
This is Fred. I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation by council for closure.
We have a motion by Mr. Berry to accept council's recommendation. Do we have a second?
This Anthony, I'll second.
Second by Mr. Harris. Any other discussion? Not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford. Mr. Shackelford.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. President, the motion passes, sorry.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Bohannon.
Item number 10 is complaint 2020-090641 against an establishment. This was a consumer complaint alleging unprofessional conduct by the respondent establishment. The consumer states that erroneous information was provided to the respondent and that the information was then used to take away the consumer's decision-making powers regarding the deceased. The consumer says that they were not consulted regarding the handling of the deceased or the deceased obituary. Additionally, the consumer states that the death certificate listed the incorrect cause of death and marital status, and the consumer was not provided a copy of the death certificate. The respondent did provide a response to this complaint, and they indicated the following: that the respondent received a copy of the durable power of attorney listing the daughter, as well as a copy of the insurance beneficiary form that listed the daughter. The respondent states that the death certificate copy in their file does list the wife and that they were married but separated. The respondent indicated that they had met with the consumer, but that the consumer indicated that they were not paying for the services. And therefore, the funeral services were arranged for and paid by the daughter of the deceased, so the respondent executed those arrangements. The respondent indicated that the cause of death on the death certificate can be amended by the physician, but that the respondent does not have control over what cause of death is listed. And the respondent did provide documentation. It's legal's recommendation to close this complaint.
This Anthony, I'll make a motion. We accept legal's recommendation to close.
We have a motion by Mr. Harris to accept legal's recommendation. Do we have a second?
Fred will second.
Second by Mr. Berry. Any other discussion? Not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon.
Item number 11 is complaint 2020-090661 against a funeral establishment. The facts are similar. They were just submitted by a different complainant family member. This was also a consumer complaint alleging unprofessional conduct. The consumer stated that their father had passed away and that the respondent had failed to research the deceased family members and failed to recognize the consumer's mother as the surviving spouse. The consumer states that the deceased was cremated. However, the consumer states that the deceased wishes were not to be cremated. And the consumer states that the respondent never reached out to the consumer regarding the deceased's obituary, which failed to mention his job working with Veteran Affairs. The respondent did provide a response as well as documentation indicating that they had received a copy of the durable power of attorney listing the daughter as well as the insurance beneficiary form, that the death certificate copy does list the wife and indicates that they were married but separated, that the respondent had met with the consumer but that the consumer was not paying for the services and the services were arranged for and paid by the daughter and those arrangements were executed, and lastly that the respondent indicated that the obituary was provided by the daughter who had paid for the funeral services. It's legal's recommendation to close this complaint as well.
This is Fred. I'll make a motion to accept council's recommendation.
This is Clark. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Berry and a second by Mr. McKinney to accept council's recommendation for closure. Any other discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon.
Item number 12 is complaint 2020-091611 against an establishment with disciplinary history. This was a consumer complaint alleging unprofessional conduct by the respondent establishment. The consumer stated that in June 2020, they contacted the respondent establishment to arrange for the cremation of a family friend, the placement of a marker for that family friend, and the moving of the consumer's sister's remains from one cemetery to another. During this time, the consumer's other sister passed away, and she made arrangements for her sister to be cremated and a marker to be placed. The consumer states that over several weeks passed, and when they went to pick up the cremated remains, they inquired about the markers. However, they were informed that because insurance was paying for them, it would be taking longer. The consumer stated that in September 2020, they again inquired about the marker placement for the two deceased and the moving of her sister's remains, but they were advised that it would be done in a couple weeks. The consumer states that they had contacted the insurance who indicated that both policies had been paid out in August 2020. The consumer states that the respondent has been unresponsive and they do not have closure on whether the markers have been placed. The respondent has not responded to this complaint and legal did attempt to reach out to the respondent. However, we were unsuccessful in doing so. Legal did speak with the consumer who stated that this time that the gravestones have been placed and the deceased has been moved. However, their experience with the respondent has had lasting physical, emotional, and mental effects. It's legal's recommendation to authorize for formal hearing and authorize a civil penalty of $1,000 via consent order, $250 for being unresponsive to this complaint.
This is Clark. I'll make a motion to accept council's recommendation. If for nothing else, just them not responding to the complaint.
We have a motion by Mr. McKinney to accept council's recommendation. Do we have a second?
This is Fred. I'll second.
Second by Mr. Berry. Any further discussion?
Mr. President, this is Anthony. Just one quick question. Is there a reason why the investigator was not sent on this one?
There was typically with these, we don't usually send an investigator for marker placement. I did attempt to reach out to them. If that's something the board would like, I can further, but the information was all provided in terms of contracts and the ordering of the marker and the timeline of the marker. So it didn't seem necessary to send for investigation on this one.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Bendel? If not, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon.
The final item is complaint 2020-08-2901 against an establishment with some disciplinary history. This was a consumer complaint alleging that the consumer had purchased a marker in 2017, and as the date of the complaint, the marker had not been placed. The consumer indicated that they had numerous conversations with the respondent regarding the placement of the marker, but that the marker had still not been placed. The respondent's representative did provide a response to the complaint and indicated that this was an oversight by the respondent, but that they are working diligently to get the marker placed. The respondent states that they had spoke to the consumer to apologize and inform them that they were taking care of the marker. Legal did reach out to the respondent regarding the placement of the marker, and the respondent did provide documentation that the marker had been ordered. However, it still has not been placed at this time. It's legal's recommendation to do an authorization for a formal hearing and authorize a civil penalty of $250 via consent order.
Ms. Bendel, did the respondent give any reason as to why such an extraordinary period of time had lapsed? Was this an oversight or?
Yeah, they indicated it was an oversight on their part. But they did provide, like I said, they did provide documentation that the marker has since been ordered.
Thank you.
This is Fred. Just a consideration for discussion is that the respondent did at least respond, and this isn't a good situation, but sometimes these mistakes do happen. It does take a little bit of time to get the marker ordered and get it down. Certainly it would have been up to the respondent. They could have refunded the family the funds for the situation, and maybe they did, but may want to consider a letter of warning on this. Just a thought.
This is Clark. Ms. Bendel, do we know whether or not the respondent made any other type of restitution for their mistake, or I'm not at all trying to place blame on the consumer. It seems like, whether they out of town or have they been trying to get this set for some period of time, or did they just not know it, or
their complaint indicated that they had numerous conversations throughout the years. As the complaint mentions, this was a marker that was purchased in 2017. So they indicated that they had contacted the respondent multiple times throughout the years, trying to inquire about the marker placement. I'm not aware if they're out of town.
Okay. I understand. I got it. I've got it now. Thank you.
This is Fred. Yeah, I remember that fact being shared now in the summary. I'll make a motion to accept council's recommendation here, and really because there was multiple attempts to get the marker set.
We have a motion by Mr. Berry to accept council's recommendation. Do we have a second?
I'll second, and I agree with that. I either wasn't listening or it wasn't clear to me, but yes, I see it now. Thank you.
Well, I think we all must have nodded off during that, because I missed the fact that it was stated that it was an oversight. So I think we all just kind of zoned out on that one. But anyway, all right, we have a motion and a second. Motion by Mr. Berry, second by Mr. McKinney. Do we have any further discussion? If not, Ms. Bohannon, would you please call the roll?
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon.
And that completes the legal report for today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Bendel. On the agenda is the Executive Director's report. Mr. Gribble, we'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, board members. First, we'll look at the legislative update for today's meeting. You'll recall after receipt of information from the Assistant Commissioner's Office, the members of the board were notified on February the 3rd that after much consideration, the Governor's Office has decided not to run the universal licensing bill. However, the modernization and merger bills are still expected to be included in the administrative package. You'll probably recall from last month, and Mr. Porch, be glad to answer any questions you have about this. It's expected or anticipated that the governor's legislative package will include reducing or redefining what a full-time apprentice is from 40 hours to 32 hours, so that some people who might be in one career and wanting to go into funeral directing, that would give them an opportunity to serve apprenticeship as they were closing up on another career. And also the other bill that's expected to be included, and again, I express these are expectations because as of yesterday, these bills have not been introduced, but the other one is some funeral directors who serve as a pre-need sales agent may be exempt from registering from pre-need sales agent registration. That's a consideration that's been given if you own your own funeral home, that there's some consideration. There might be a bill that would do that. The next item is the licensee report. This is a report of license administratively approved by the executive director pursuant to board authority for the period of January 9, 2021 to February 5, 2021, and you can see those listed there. Of course, the board is familiar that we have a contract with International Conference Funeral Service Examining Boards to administer Tennessee laws, rules, and regulations examinations and the Tennessee State Board exam for the arts section and the State Board exam for the science section. And we get a report at the end of the year, and we just thought that it might be some information that the board would like to review and to be aware of, to kind of know what scores are and things of that nature. Ms. Bohannon worked on this, and Ms. Bohannon, if you'd like to, do you want to, I may have some comments I want to make, but if you want to, go ahead and present this.
Hi. The examination results that are listed in the director's report, those show exactly who has taken the test throughout 2020. And we, as Mr. Gribble stated, we get this report every year. It also shows if there has been a retake. The Tennessee laws examination scores are good for 1 year. So if a person fails to submit their application within a year of taking that test and it's outside that year, they have to request to retake. And it also goes along with if they fail the arts or science or anything like that, we can go ahead and ask them to, we're asked if they can retake that exam as well. This information is basically self-explanatory. We have first-time users, retakes, and it lists if they take the SBE and also the National Board examination as well. I'll entertain any questions that you may have concerning this report. It also lists how many people actually took the test and the average score that is averaged out between the amount of people who've taken it as well. Are there any questions concerning this report? And I need to clarify, the retake exam is only for the Tennessee laws test, not for the arts and science.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item then. One of the comments I wanted to make about that is sometimes we get a request to take a state board science exam, and there's really no need for an applicant to be taking a state board science exam. If they're, I can't think of any situation to where that they would be needing to take a state board science exam instead of the national board. And it really does a disservice to them to take the state board exam, because if they try to do reciprocity from one state to another, then the succeeding state may not recognize that exam because it was a state board exam instead of the national board exam. So, of course, there's a lot of reason for them to take the state board arts, because that's the funeral directing, where they're doing the funeral directing only, where they get 30 semester hours at a college accredited with American Board of Funeral Service Education, and then do the arts. But we encourage them, strongly encourage them, if they're eligible to take the national boards, to always take the national boards and do it in that fashion. There were no closed establishment report and a disciplinary action report. This is the report of consent orders have been administratively accepted or approved by the executive director pursuant to board authority, and as reported on the December 2020 regulatory board's disciplinary action report. One funeral home there and one civil penalty of $500. The complaint report, this was as of February 4, 2021, a total of 35 complaints that were open. 12 of those were against funeral director and or embalmers, and 23 against establishments, for a total of 35. And I, as well as Ms. Bohannon, be glad to answer any questions that you have on any of those matters.
Thank you, Mr. Gribble. Does anyone have any questions for either Mr. Gribble or Ms. Bohannon regarding the information presented?
Motion that we approve the director's report.
We have a motion by Mr. Rahm to approve the director's report as presented. Do we have a second?
Second by Fred.
Second by Mr. Berry. Any further discussion? All in favor, excuse me, Ms. Bohannon, please call the roll.
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rahm,
Yes.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon. I do not believe we have any license applications to review or consider today, either for individuals or establishments. Is that correct, Mr. Gribble?
That is correct, sir.
Is there any new business that needs to be brought before the board today? There being no,
Motion to adjourn.
all right, we have a motion.
Second.
Mr. Rahm. We have a motion, I believe, by Mr. Rahm, and who made the second?
Me, Clark.
Mr. McKinney, second. I'm sure there's no discussion on that matter, so Ms. Bohannon, would you please call the roll?
Fred Berry,
Yes.
Anthony Harris,
Yes.
Tanya Haynes,
Yes.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Scotty Porsche,
Yes.
Charles Rahm,
Yeah.
Robert Shackelford.
Yes.
The motion's passed to adjourn.
All right, thank you, Ms. Bohannon. We stand adjourned at 11:01 a.m.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to everyone for being present at our meeting today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.